I built a fully working to-do list where you can add and complete items using ReactJS and Google Firestore for our database. So a few requirements before we get started. We need these 4 packages installed. Now that we've got all the requirements out the way, we need to open up our terminal, type in the command yarn create react app, and I'm going to call it to do react.js. Let that whiz through, and once that's done, just navigate inside the directory and do yarn add Firebase, and we also want some React icons. Then do yarn start. That'll launch your web server where you can navigate to localhost 3000 and you'll see your React page. After you do that, we're going to go to the Firebase console and you want to add a new project, call it whatever you like, give it a name, hit continue, and then immediately create a web app. And when you create your web app, it'll give you all of this code. You want to go and copy that and paste that in the React app we've just created. You want to open up your project in your editor and navigate straight to the index.js and paste it in between your root and your imports. Then you want to take the app constant and add it as a prop to our app component. Now that we've added Firebase to our app component, we need to open up our app.js, delete everything that's in there. We're going to import a few important libraries from React, Firebase, and our React icons. Then I'm going to go ahead and define all of the placeholders so you know what we're going to go and create. First, we're going to add in an app as a class. This is going to be our main component with a couple of assisting components as functions, task, and form, just to simplify the code a bit. Then inside of our app, we've got 6 main bits we need to go and create. The constructor, component did mount, handle add task, handle completed task, get data, and finally, our main render method. These are all the main components you're going to need to create your fully working application. Now all the placeholders have been defined, let's actually start building them out. So let's start off with the constructor. Here, we're going to define our initial state of tasks as an empty array. Then we're going to want to bind our handlers for add task and complete task so they can actually be used by the front end. Next, we're going to go ahead and build our get data. This is going to be the method that actually collects the information from our Firestore database on Google. We're going to define an empty array. This is going to be the array that we populate. Go ahead and define your database that we passed from the index.js. Then we want to start building our query. Now, this is going to be based off of a collection. We'll pass in our DB and we're going to create our own path. We're going to call it tasks. Now this will work just as it is. But what we're going to do is we're going to add on a where clause to look for tasks that we're going to mark as completed. To do that, add the following: where completed is equal to false. Then I'm going to go ahead and get the documents and loop through the individual documents with the for each and populate our T array with the data that we get from Firestore. And then finally, we're going to return that information. Now that we've got our get data built in our component did not mount, we can actually go and call that get data and take the results and then set the states that we initially set at the top with the results. That way, when we open our application, the first thing it's going to do is to populate any tasks that are currently in our database. Now we want to go build our add task method so we can start to populate this database. So like before, let's initialize the database. Then we want to go and add a document as a collection, put the DB in with the path tasks, and then we want to pass in some data. I'm going to put the name in that will pass into the method parameter and complete it as false. That way, anything we add will always appear the first time until we mark it as completed. Then the same as you got in the component.mount, just add the get data just to update the page so we have the most up-to-date information after you've added a task. Lastly, before we get to building all the UI, we just need to build our method to complete our tasks. So again, initialize your database, and then this time we want set document because we're going to be updating a record, and we want to pass in a document with the database, the path. This time we need to include the ID so we know which record we're going to update. Then we just need to pass in some information to update. I'm going to mark it as completed true this time. And then so it doesn't blank out the other information in the record, we're just going to mark it as merged true. Finally, like before, just update the records like you've done previously. Wicked, we've got most of the hard bits done. Now we just need to build our UI. So we're going to start off with a few divs with some bootstrap classes. And these classes are just going to help with our mobile responsiveness. Then inside that div, I'm going to add a nice header, give us a nice title with a separator, and a couple more divs. Our task component is going to be looped based on the information in our state. So let's go ahead and do that now. State tasks, loop through it, so then we've got the individual task available for us that we can pass into the task component. As it's a React component, we always need to define a key, but then we also need the ID, so we have to pass that separately. Then pass the name of the task, as well as attaching the handler for completing our tasks. And then lastly, within this render method, we just want to have the form and pass in the handler for adding tasks. Then for our task component, Again, we're going to just return some HTML with some Bootstrap classes. Make sure you pass in your key because this is a looped component. And then we're going to pop in our name with a button. For the onClick, we're going to link it with the onComplete prop that we've defined here, which is linked to the onComplete task. Then finally, we're just going to add in a little FA check, which is a font awesome with size 16. That's this FA check here that you've imported from your React icons. Finally, we're at the last bit. We're just going to build our form now. It's good for this form to have its own state. So we're going to go ahead and define a state for name with an initial value of nothing. Then our form, like all the others, needs to return some HTML. But unlike the others, this one's actually going to be a form in the beginning, not a div. Then we'll have some divs. Inside our first div, we're going to have an input field so we can enter some text. That's going to have the value of name from our state, because every time we change something, we're going to update the value of name using the event value. That way, as you type, we'll be calling set name, which will be populating this value here with whatever you type on your keyboard. And finally, we're just going to have a submit button, and we're going to mark it as disabled if name has nothing in it, so we can't just click add a blank value. And then we'll just add in another font awesome icon, ensuring we have a space using non-breaking space, and then just the word add. A couple more bits and we're done. We just need to add in a handler for submitting our form. Make sure for this particular event you prevent all the defaults. You want to customize exactly what happens, and then you want to link it all together with this handle add. So when you click your submit button, you'll actually send it to Firestore. Then after you've actually sent the information, just set the value as a blank again, so you don't end up adding the same task twice. Lastly, we just need to actually define our onSubmit for our form and add in our handler that we just created. That way, when we click the button, it will trigger this handle submit, which will trigger the handle add, which links to the prop that you added in here, which will link to this bit here, which will link to the handle task, which finally lands on the method you created here, which will take the name that you pass it and send it to Firestore. One thing that we forgot to do is to add in our Bootstrap library, so if it looks really ugly like this, all you need to do is go to your index.html and add in Bootstrap CSS. So in your code, go to your project, open up public and index.html, and say just under the title, but making sure you're inside the head, just add in Bootstrap. Then in the index CSS, we're just going to go and delete everything and just add in a couple of custom colors, making the background dark and making all the text a light color. That way when you go back to your app, it looks quite pretty now. One thing I forgot that we need to do is initialize our Firestore database. So continue on the console and then go to build and go to Firestore database. Here you'll be asked to create your database, and I'm just going to start it in test mode just to save some time. We are done. We have fully created a working to-do application in ReactJS. So let's go ahead and test it. And voila, my first task. If you head over to your Firestore database, give it a refresh, and you can actually see my first task marked as completed false. When I hit the tick button here, they'll disappear, and in our Firestore database you can see now it's marked as true. If I edit that and mark it as false again, it would reappear if I give it a refresh. And voila, a fully working to-do application built in ReactJS in 8 minutes. If you liked this video and want to see more of this, or have ideas that you want me to create, leave me a comment, and I'd love it if you liked the video and subscribed. Until next time,